free.
Welcome to the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you listening in and catching information that you will not catch on mainstream media anywhere, either on the radio or on the television. So this is one of the few sources where you can actually get real information about what is happening on issues that are being summarily ignored by mainstream media. So today is Wednesdays, and on Wednesdays I interview activists who are out there doing all they can to get the word out about inequities in our society and on the nuclear issue, because as we know, to this date, any nuclear issue, anything that has to do with nuclear is subject to two things. One is the Price-Anderson Act, which allows complete indemnification, meaning nobody is ever going to be held liable, no corporation and no individual, for knowingly or unknowingly causing harm in the past, present, or future. And for those of us scratching our head wondering how all these nuclear problems could happen and the government can just deny they cause harm, well, in America at least that's how it works. It's the Price-Anderson Act. And the second thing that we are all becoming acutely aware of is that the 90% rule is strictly enforced in any regards. We see it from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the EPA. And to clarify with you what the 90% rule is, the 90% rule, Dr. John Goffman studied the citizens of Hiroshima after World War II, when he discovered to his dismay that the United States government, right after the war they had taken all these statistics, they basically destroyed everything. They destroyed their statistical evidence on children and women. So he decided he was going to do his own study. He studied them for 20 years. In the mid-60s, he was pretty much ousted from the nuclear industry when his conclusions did not parlay up to what the government wanted to hear. His conclusions basically said that the nuclear industry, every agency, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and at the time it was called the Atomic Energy Commission, we now call that the NRC, the United States military and the United States government deny that radiation causes harm, and this is mandated inside. This is what they're told to do. They deny that radiation causes harm, and they underreport the negative effects of radiation by 90%. And that gives you the answers. Those two things give you the answers as to why. In St. Louis, when there was a flood right near Bridgeton and Westlake landfill, where we know it's leaking radiation, the EPA had the nerve the very next day to come out and put a statement on their website that says, we don't anticipate any harm to human health. And in fact, most of us are pretty sick of that phrase. Yesterday, there was a reported spill of uranium powder that Canadian up in Canada, and the Canadian government within 24 hours did exactly the same thing. They said no harm to human health. So today I am really focusing on this issue in St. Louis because in my view, the more I unpeel this onion, the more I realize that we have our own Fukushima going on in the United States. So a week ago Monday, I interviewed a citizen from St. Louis named Wendy Lumetta, who has educated herself, is a victim of the nuclear radiation herself, and we did not get through half of the information that she carries around in her head and the activities that she's done. So I have brought her back here today to give us more information. And we're interviewing her not just as a citizen of St. Louis, but frankly as a citizen activist, as a person who is now aware that this is an urgent issue. So, Wendy, let me bring you into the show. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lonnie. It's a pleasure to speak with you, and I just can't tell you how much I appreciate the care and consideration that you've had towards the issues regarding St. Louis. It's not your hometown, and for you to take it on as your issue really warms my heart and makes me realize that there are good people in the world that want to help, and I just want to really thank you for the attention that you're giving this matter.
Well, you're welcome, and you know what, there are, to be honest, there are really more good people in this world than there are bad and evil people, and a lot of the good people are just so afraid to face this. This is why I say at the end of the show and on my YouTube channel, put your courage feet on, because it's almost like we have to put on a pair of shoes to give us the courage. Put your courage feet on, because this is probably the most difficult issue to face in our culture because it is so devastating. Nuclear pollution lasts for hundreds of thousands of years. It causes DNA damage to our children and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. Nuclear radiation pollution causes harm. It doesn't even really show up for 3 to 4 generations. There's a really great website that I encourage all our listeners to go to, and it's called the independentwho.org. And those are the doctors who used to work for the World Health Organization who got sick of their information being suppressed and modified to downplay the harm. Basically what happens is all of their studies that they have done are censored by the International Atomic Energy Agency, who, shockingly enough, have complete authority over all their medical studies. So the International Atomic Energy Agency can basically tell all of these scientists at the World Health Organization that if they don't like their results of their scientific studies, they do not allow them to get published, and they do not allow them to become known worldwide. So that was a shocking bit of information for me. So thank you for joining us, Wendy. First, let me ask you, prior to coming on to the show, one of the things I've been sort of jumping up and down like a little chicken here, out here in Oregon, is we need to move these people that are being affected. And I thought a reasonable area would be a 10-mile radius. I mentioned that to you before I went on the air because I'm kind of shocked that people aren't demanding that. You mentioned to me that this is a highly populated area. I went to the Google Maps, and when you go to Google Maps and you look at the area, it looks green like it's a rural area. And I zoomed in, and you told me this has probably, how many people did you say in this area?
Well, given the city and the county and the external surrounding counties, that's serve the St. Louis area. I'm going to say in the neighborhood of 2 million people. I'm not a statistician, so I could be way off on that, but I don't think so. I think that's pretty close to what the actual metropolitan count is.
It looks like it when you zoom in. This speaks to why there's such denial from the government, not just the 90% rule, but this must just be devastating to the government to face this. Like, this really is our own Fukushima in the heart of our country. One of the things I'd like to talk to you about is the fact that people in St. Louis, a lot of the citizens don't want to face this. What do you think that is about? What's going on there when people don't want to talk about it?
Well, I think one big reason is because there is a lot of hometown pride in St. Louis. I know that I was born and raised here, never lived anywhere else, same for my husband, and he was one of 9 children. So we're talking about large families that their businesses and their families go back several generations, and people in the Midwest love their sports. We've got our Cardinals. I'm not going to mention the Rams, although I just did, but at any rate, it's something that people really, they like to come together. We like our pork steaks and our toasted ravioli and gooey butter cake, and we have St. Louis traditions that people love, and it's a hometown feel, and that, I think, is what is especially devastating to many people, is because this is their hometown. This is where they grew up, spent their childhood, had wonderful memories in their lives, and now to find out that this is, sort of the legacy after the fact has been very upsetting to a lot of people.
Wow. Well, look, I actually said this to you prior to the show. I think that the Rams are moving because of radiation. And you mentioned to me that, the EPA said that the Rams stadium or their locker room was radioactive? Tell us, can you tell us anything? Can you speak to that at all?
Well, the only thing that I can speak to is that the Rams practice stadium was in very close proximity to the Westlake and Bridgeton landfills, and that at some point, some entity, and I'm not sure who, did some radioactive testing on site and found there to be radioactivity there at the Rams testing facility, test stadium that they had, their practice stadium, which was located right there. I'm not sure about who performed that testing or what the results are, other than that it was in very close proximity to it, and that I believe they did find radioactivity there.
Wow. Well, can you update us on what is going on in St. Louis legally and technically? I mean, has there been any movement on these pieces of legislation, or has the governor declared a state of emergency as we've asked, or what can you tell us on the update of what's going on with moving this ball down the road, so to speak?
Well, I probably don't have the latest and greatest information from all sources, but I have spoken to most of those entities. I've actually received no comment from Governor Nixon's office, so he's pretty much not interested in acknowledging the issue. As far as I know, Senator McCaskill, Senator Blunt, Congressman Clay, and Congresswoman Wagner are still receiving calls and inquiries. The understanding is that it is now going to sit in a committee with these other people in charge, that it actually has to be approved by the committee first, and where those actions stand seems to be a matter that changes on a daily basis, and I really don't keep up with it, so I wouldn't say for sure, but I feel confident in saying that I'm not aware that either one of the bills has been through committee or has been accepted as legislation or taken to the floor or whatever. So I think they're kind of sitting there waiting for action.
Well, I have to say that this morning I actually am really, I am beyond words when I look at the giganticness, the total catastrophic effect that, one of the things that I'm actually kind of a new activist. So I was told by a couple of, quote, anti-nuke activists who are pretty establishment that, we kind of have to cool our heels. We can't expect anything to happen very quickly. And I think that that's a completely unreasonable position to be in, because people's lives are being threatened. And I don't know what it's going to take for America to really realize how catastrophic this is, but this is not a small issue. Why don't you share some of the information that we didn't get to about your own personal experience and your own family members, how that has been affected?
Well, I mean, to even predate, well, I shouldn't say predate, but even when I was a small child, there were things that seemed amiss. And I remember that there was one family that was within my grade school, and we're talking about a really small private Lutheran grade school that did not have a lot of kids going to it. And it turns out that at a very young age, someone that was associated with the school, their son had testicular cancer at a very young age. And I remember that I was very young and that we were, discussing how could this happen. Well, within, I would say maybe a year or two, the same individual's brother also had testicular cancer. So 2 testicular cancer cases in one family of a group of not very many people at all. And as I was growing up and living in the neighborhood that backed up to Coldwater Creek, there would be various stories. I knew of a girl whose family was in the restaurant business, and she had an unusual cancer where she lost her leg. And it was very, no one had ever heard of anything like this, and this was just another young woman that happened to live in the neighborhood. As I got a little bit older, I started to babysit other families, and one of the men who had children that I babysat for, he ended up with pancreatic cancer and just a horrible death. So it wasn't as though cancer was something that was unheard of. It just seemed like we didn't really know anybody that didn't die from cancer. There was no, strokes or heart attacks or other things. It was just a whole lot of cancer.
Wow.
And
well, I'll tell you what, testicular cancer is a hallmark of radioactive poisoning. That's one of the things that radiation does do is it affects young boys, their testes. It is a known fact. That is not even in question. That's 100% guaranteed scientific evidence.
And hindsight being 2020, I understand that now. But at the time that I was in grade school and we knew these boys and they had cancer, we could not fathom what could possibly have happened to them. It never occurred to any of us that it was something that was currently happening to all of us. So it's just that the latent effects of the chronic ionizing radiation mean that you don't necessarily get cancer right away. Sometimes it's a very slow-growing cancer that takes years to present. And for people that have unusual diseases, I know that there's also some diseases that can only be caused by ionizing radiation, such as Hashimoto's disease, which is a thyroid condition. If you have it, it's because you were exposed to ionizing radiation. That is the cause. So while I applaud Washington's efforts and everyone who wants to find a cure for cancer, what I want to do is find the definitive causes of cancer and try to eradicate those things. We don't need help treating the cancer as much as we need help not causing the cancer and giving people a reason to understand how it's caused and what they can do to protect themselves to avoid radiation and understand where it is, where it comes from, and how to take action steps towards eliminating it from your risk factors.
Look, my feeling, and this is my thing, when Joe Biden's son died of cancer, I literally called the White House and I called Joe Biden's office and said, you know what, it is time for the denial to end. The denial of the nuclear of the harm that's caused by nuclear radiation is catastrophically destroying our country. We're killing ourselves with this denial. This is the thing. When the president said we're going to try to find a cure for cancer, we probably do have some cures for cancer, but we're going to continue to get cancer as long as our government refuses to immediately remediate all these sites. We have one of the things, I mean, honestly, I'm almost without words at the catastrophic events that are happening throughout the country. 60% of the uranium tailings are on Native American lands. The very first nuclear meltdown happened only 7 miles away from that methane time bomb that's going off in Los Angeles, which is why those people, their noses are bleeding. Methane does not cause your nose to bleed. Nuclear radiation causes your nose to bleed. So this is what I call our come to Jesus moment in America, man. We really seriously must become adults and accept the fact that our country made some very grand and gigantic mistakes on how we handle nuclear radiation and the waste and all of this stuff. Like how our country is facing this nuclear issue has been categorically a 100% mistake. But my issue is I'm not interested in blaming people because we made mistakes as a nation. It's all of us. We all did it. And so I'm not interested in blaming, but responsibility looks forward. We need to join hands and we need to face this together, put our courage feet on and face it, because the reason people don't want to talk about radiation is they just feel so out of control with it. It's like once you're affected, what do you do about it? I mean, it's quite a devastating thing. It's a very sad thing. And I really applaud you for being willing to speak out and, join the forces of people who are trying to get some equity going with this. Is there anything you'd like to add to that? I mean, do you have any additional thoughts on this one?
Well, right now I just want to say thank you for girl power and for enabling me and you to have this conversation, and I hope other people feel empowered to speak out on the subject. I'm certainly no expert. I'm not a public speaker at all, but I feel so strongly and passionately about this subject that I will talk to anyone for as long as they're willing to listen to me about the seriousness of this situation, and that there's something that everyone can do. There's a couple different kinds of people that help with these issues. And one kind of help, which they're both needed, but we call those people armchair advocates. They're willing to advocate for the situation, but they're really not going to get off their couch and do anything. They'll, perhaps send emails, or they will perhaps make phone calls. But for the most part, what they do as advocates is from the comfiness of their armchair. Mm-hmm. What we really need are more advocates that are action advocates. We need people to engage with the public figures and the elected that are representing us, and get them into personal conversations where they look you right in the eye and explain to you what is more important to them, their campaign finances or your health and neighborhood. So I think it's very important that people become action-oriented. Being an armchair advocate is great, but being an action advocate is even better.
Yeah, it is actually completely necessary. We call those, on the YouTube community, they're referred to as keyboard activists. They're people who are willing to make phone calls but don't really do anything or get out. And, that's one step out. This is the thing. This is a slow awakening. None of us, most of us, I would say, in America, before Fukushima, I never even thought that nuclear radiation was any kind of a problem. I never even understood it. I honestly had no concept that it even was out of control, that things weren't being handled. I 100% bought the Disney Peaceful Atom program that sold us that the government was going to protect us 100%. And that's when I started looking into this. And frankly, when I saw what I had been at this for about 2 years when this story broke for me. I know it's been in St. Louis for a couple of years, but it didn't come to the news until about 3 or 4 or 5 months ago nationally, right? Because it's beyond, it's so out of control. The combination of the Bridgeton landfill, the Westlake landfill, and the confluence of all of this has made it a national issue. And I'd like to talk to you about this idea. where people in St. Louis are saying, well, we'd like the government to do more studies. We'd like more information. When in fact, and they're almost afraid to admit that their health problems are caused by this. What do I mean, can you comprehend? I mean, when people talk to you in St. Louis and you're trying to talk to them, what do they say to you if they don't want to discuss it? I mean, how is that broached?
It's pretty clear because I would say the majority of the people that I know are not willing to discuss the subject with me outside the parameters of the people that I know throughout the Westlake and Bridgeton and Coldwater Creek communities. So people, and that also includes doctors, because the reality is doctors are not paid to speculate about how you got sick. They are paid to start treating you and get you better from that point on. So regardless of how they feel or their opinions on the subject, they are not going to stick their neck out and say, this is the thing that caused your cancer, if there is even the smallest potential that it could be caused from some other thing. That's not what doctors do. Doctors treat people, and the ones that don't are generally the ones that are scoffed at by the physicians' communities. You talked about John Goffman. I know that Dr. Helen Caldicott has also been a huge nuclear advocate, and
Yes.
I believe she's out of Australia. And when we had our most recent meeting, it wasn't even our most recent meeting, it was one in the fall, and it was one where a new doctor, Dr. Paul Chark was his name, from the CDC, and he basically treated the meeting in a somewhat disrespectful way because people were asking about the causes of cancer, and he was sort of in a very cavalier way saying, well, these things cause cancer, and then these things cure cancer. And so he was adding a lot of ammunition to people's upset about the doctor's willingness to speak to the fact that the radiation does cause cancer, as opposed to what they're willing to state now, which is pretty much that they know it could cause cancer, but so could cooking on Teflon, and so could, sitting on, I mean, there's a million and one reasons why, and their job is not to speculate. Their job is only to treat you from then on.
Well, you could actually get your blood tested. You could get your bone tested. You could actually find out how much radiation you have in your body. That's the interesting thing. And you were actually absolutely right that this is one of the things Dr. John Goffman talked about, and Helen Caldicott talks about in her books too, is that if there is the attitude of it has been this way from the get-go, that they decided a long time ago that because they wanted the nuclear weapons, that anytime there was any other reason that a person might have this disease or effect caused by radiation would be taken off the table and nobody would talk about it. And in fact, nobody was allowed to talk about it. So you go to your doctor right now and say, hey, I want to be tested for radiation. I want to know what levels of radiation are in my blood and where I'm at. Your doctor will fight you tooth and nail. In fact, you probably can't get that done. I mean, it is complete the fascism, and I'm straight up, to be honest. I am not a political talker. That's why I could never run for political office, because I'm too much of a straight talker. This is really straight up fascism, where fascism, the clinical word for fascism, is where the military protects the interests of major corporations, and that is exactly what we have now. Exactly, and I'm going to keep pushing back. I'm going to law school so that I can overturn the Price-Anderson Act. I would suggest, and I actually did give the phone number of an attorney to Drew the other day when I interviewed him, but, there's only 6 law firms in the entire country that will take on the nuclear industry. And there's a law firm in California that is representing the soldiers from the USS Reagan. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Are you familiar with what went on at the USS Reagan? It's kind of shocking. Right after Fukushima, the government sent the USS Reagan to help these people remediate their problem in St. Louis, and not in St. Louis, in Fukushima. And the soldiers were sent out in full nuclear meltdowns without any clothing on their bodies at all. When they were helping to clean up Fukushima, they came back onto the USS Reagan, and the soldiers began to get it that maybe something was wrong, because when they got back on the boat, they were put into a special room, told to take off all their clothes, and their clothes were put into a contaminated dump site. And so now most of those soldiers are very, very, very sick. There's quite a number of soldiers who are suing the government to help them. The government's denying that the radiation caused them any harm. So this is kind of a very serious issue that goes even to our military. So I'm not shocked that they're in denial about what's going on in St. Louis. That does not mean that we cannot demand a different attitude. It really is up to us to make sure that all of this, that they actually end up. We need a change of attitude, essentially, from our elected officials is really, really what we need to have. I mean, this whole idea that we can continue to deny that radiation is causing harm, I think that's one of my biggest shocks, to be very honest, is that our government is really, really willing to let an entire city die at the hands of the nuclear industry. I find that completely shocking. So let me ask you this. In St. Louis, where you're at right now, and all of these people are coming around, what activities are you doing that you do on a daily basis to get people to be aware, to talk to our elected officials? And I ask you this so that we can kind of role model for people what people ought to be doing.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I've tried to advocate for this issue for about 2.5 years now, and the thing that caused the most reaction was when the school systems that were in the immediate area sent home emergency notices about what to do in case of an emergency at the landfill. That is actually what stirred up more interest than 2.5 years of my trying to speak to different electeds. I would regularly go to my county council and testify and prepare statements regarding the harms and pleading for help. I would strike it up in a conversation with somebody who's standing next to me at the grocery store. My husband likes to go to garage sales, and he keeps the business cards in his pocket and hands them out to anyone who may mention that they smell something funny or
wow.
have anything. Then it's literally been a one-to-one word-of-mouth issue. But then, like I said, when the kids came home from the school district with the emergency action plans, then the parents got upset. Then the parents started to realize, oh, there is a problem, and we just haven't been paying attention to it. So,
wow.
So I believe participation has increased quite a bit from that. But then you talk about how only the most closely impacted school districts are the ones that sent anything home. Maybe the 4 or 5 districts that are geographically closest to Bridgeton and Westlake. But they haven't sent anything out for any of the other areas of St. Louis. They really don't want to draw a lot of attention to it because they don't want to make it look like there is an impending disaster.
Wow. Well, look, you know what? The people of St. Louis need to get legal representation. And I just now looked up the Bonner Law, the people that are representing the USS Reagan. Part of why the methane leak in California is getting any kind of public faces, they have all lawyered up. All the lawyers are out there in California. So I'm going to state this phone number for Bonner and Bonner, attorneys at law. They are the representatives for the USS Reagan soldiers, and they went to these basically to court to fight the U.S. government to say, hey, you have a legal, we want to be able to sue TEPCO. The government was saying that the soldiers couldn't sue TEPCO, and the judge basically said, yes, you can. So now that's in place. But I think the people of St. Louis need to lawyer up, and I would encourage anybody in St. Louis who hears this to contact them to talk about a class action lawsuit to move this down the road, because BonnerLaw.com, these people know how to fight the nuclear industry quite effectively. Their phone number is 415-331-3070. You can go to BonnerLaw.com, and there's a contact page, and you can fill out your description of your legal matter there. Fill out your name, your email address, phone number, possible or legal issue. And, St. Louis needs to lawyer up, bottom line. Part of the reason that people, I believe, are in denial is they're not getting adequate legal help. It's just citizens out there trying to demand answers from a government agencies that have all been mandated to kick the can down the road. And on top of that, I think maybe this has also another issue, and tell me if you think I'm wrong or not, but a lot of these legal representatives that you're talking to live in St. Louis. You know what I mean? They're just as exposed as everybody else, and I think that their level of anxiety is just as great as anybody else's. So they're very willing to live in denial themselves. Did you pick up on any of that when you are talking to any of these people?
Well, I haven't really been pursuing any legal aspect. I'm not personally looking to get anything out of this. All I really want is for my hometown to be cleaned up.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, legal action. That's the legal action. I mean, if you get lawyered up, you can get what really needs to be set up is a trust fund for the city of St. Louis from the federal government to help families. Obviously, as I'm looking at this map, I about fell off my chair this morning looking at the map of this area. If not 1 million people, several 100,000 people are living way, 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 way too close to this area. And those families need a trust fund so that they don't have to carry the burden of the healthcare costs. These are the kinds of things that a lawyer can help you do. Help you get some legal trust funds set up so that you guys can actually get medical remediation. And maybe they can move the legislative ball down the road a little bit faster than just citizens begging for help. Do you know if there are any sit-ins or any type of protests that are being planned or anything like that that's where people are actually gathering their bodies in the street to demand action?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because just this morning they had a prayer vigil that was outside of the landfill, the perimeter of the landfill. For all I know, it's still going on. I think it started at 10, which is when our broadcast started. But there are several groups of nuns that get together. I think it's every other Wednesday, and they hold a prayer vigil outside of the landfill, and they have signs. They try to engage people, and then of course pray for the cause. So that happens every other Wednesday. There have also been many other attempts to increase visibility and get people more to pay more attention to the issue. And I think largely it's one that people feel like, well, what is one person to do? Well, one person can actually do a lot. So I hope that everyone that hears me today understands that they are an integral part of this process, that their voice does matter, and they need to make sure that it gets heard. There is a little bit too much fear, I think, and maybe that is because St. Louis is sort of conservative, and it's certainly a Republican state in general, and so people sort of are closed-mouthed about things. They don't really want to have a lot to say because they don't want to be judged for being opinionated, but I think that if you're not going to be opinionated about the health and welfare of the lives around you, human lives, animal lives, and the planet Earth, then what's it all for? This is the very reason that we all need to come together, because this radioactive pollution does not know any borders. It doesn't understand race or religion or political awareness or anything. It impacts everyone. So that's why I'm hoping that with the visibility of this show and with other conscientious individuals that are committed to helping this process, that we're going to get the word out and that people are going to care more, and they're going to say, what can I do? And we're going to get them out of their armchairs and into the council meetings and into, I don't want to say more radicalism. I really don't support physical action being taken in terms of intimidation to other people or
I agree
anything
completely.
like that.
We don't need more violence. Violence is not the answer in any way. Verbal or physical is not the answer. What we need is a rationality. We need to help our elected officials understand that the status quo has been misled, and we need a new paradigm. We need a new view that this is an urgent public health issue. And frankly, we're not looking to string people up. What we want is responsibility. We just want people to understand. We need our elected officials to own the denial, the harm that denial is causing, because that's really what's happening. Their status quo has been to deny that radiation causes harm or that there's any problem. When we have children dying, when we have families like yourself being affected who can't have babies, who have had issues, who are living their lives, but their quality of life has been sorely diminished, we need to learn to remediate that. And frankly, part of what happens in America is most of us are aware that the war machine is our only product now. We don't really have products coming out of the United States. Our number one product is war. And, we could shift that paradigm from being a war machine to a science industry technology. We have the brains in the United States. We have the education. We have really great opportunities to build a scientific community that will face these gigantic issues that we have. And frankly, we could be the leader in the world of scientific recovery and remediation of the harm that nuclear has done, not just in the United States, but around the world. That's my focus. I think we need to pick up a mantle of being honest brokers in this, and we could lead the way and rebuild our economy just based on that. So,
from your lips to God's ears, Lonnie, I hope that it does turn out that way, because there are so many things to be learned by looking at cultures that do not engage in war as the first practice that they would come to resolve an issue. I think that the war machine in the United States needs to, it's just disappointing to me when I hear Republicans say that they can't wait to build up the Sixth Fleet and to send more people off to war. War is not the answer. War never was the answer. And it is still from 70 years ago that we're dealing with the impacts of this war. And I also just wanted to mention one other related thing, and that was when you talked about the Disney film that promoted the friendly atom. I believe that a segment of that film actually is part of the documentary called The First Secret City, which is going to be airing here in St. Louis, I want to say this weekend. It's had a couple of different times, and it was in the St. Louis Film Festival. But we have two documentaries out now, one called The First Secret City and the other one called The Safe Side of the Fence. And they are both integral to understanding the entire nuclear history of St. Louis. We've been very well represented by the directors, Carl Seltzer, Allison Carrick, and Tony West, and they have all put their heart and soul into putting a piece together, or putting pieces together that really explain the entire history of what's happening in St. Louis. And these people are not interested in trying to make St. Louis look bad. They're doing this because they love St. Louis, because we all honor it. We want it to be the great city that we know it to be. And, you know, if it has an ugly spot, let's fix it. Let's not pretend that it's not there. Let's not turn the other way or close our eyes or act like we don't see it. This is something that is fixable, something that we have the ability, and somewhere there will be the resources to fix this problem, and we have to hold the people that are financially responsible accountable for that, and that includes Bill Gates, who is the majority shareholder through Cascade Investments. So if I were to encourage anyone today to do anything with regards to action, I would say maybe it's a day to try to contact Bill Gates and ask him if he will consider, rather than letting this loophole that the taxpayers fall through pay for this fire and nuclear waste at Westlake, maybe he can kick in some of the interest that he's receiving off of some of his investments to try to help clean the area up. He shouldn't be paying for lobbyists to fight us. He should be paying for cleanup efforts and some outside-the-box thinking in terms of how to remediate it in a way that is safe and healthy for the people that live around here.
Yes, I agree with you. And this actually speaks to this next issue that I wanted to sort of briefly, we're running out of time. This is such a gigantic issue. We could have you on quite often. This is something that we really need to explore much more in order to get to the source of this. But one of the things that you said was that being a Republican state, people think it's rude to talk about nuclear radiation, and they're very proud of the fact that we do have this war machine because they're Republicans and they believe in protecting our country. I would like to challenge that mindset and not. Part of what's happened over the last 70 years is the divisions among people based on parties. And so there's a lot of name calling, a lot of just horrible things that have happened to the morality of our country based on the political manipulation. And it has all been funded by these mega corporations that want us at each other's throats and don't want us joining forces to stop these unconscionable acts, like refusing to admit that Westlake landfill and Coldwater Creek have catastrophic effects on the entire city of St. Louis. And this whole thing about people don't want to talk about it because they feel like it's rude. I was actually kind of shocked by that. But my goal is, when you said from God's ears to your lips, I sort of look at it the opposite way. It's from, God's lips to my ears. Like, I feel very compelled. I cannot, this picked me. This is not something, if I had my druthers, I'd love to be able to wake up every morning and be completely ignorant of this issue because it's very catastrophic. But this is the time we have been called to face this. This is a time when we can show our true compassion, our true humanity, and really exercise our spiritual faith by believing that we will find the answers once we face it together and we can join hands. This is why these prayer vigils, I encourage everyone to join in those prayer vigils, because when people put their minds together, solutions happen sort of magically, and that is the magic of the spiritual events that go on. And we are in a time when it is imperative for us to move beyond the political propaganda that has happened since World War II, World War I, when they began to realize they could manipulate people's minds and leave us in a state of constant fear so that we could be frothed up so that they could just become war profiteers. It's an unconscionable act, but we must face this. This is something that we absolutely must face because it is not going away. It's only going to get worse. So, I'm seeing this as, to me, after looking at this map this morning, St. Louis is America's Fukushima. This is a nuclear disaster that has we didn't have big eruptions, and it was only because of the fire that we sort of found out about it, correct?
That's my understanding. I didn't even know anything about it until after people had already become activated toward the issue. I have lived here my whole life, and I had absolutely no idea.
Wow. So what's up with the fire? I heard this plan that the fire, how EPA has promised they're going to build a wall in between the two sites to keep the nuclear radiation from catching fire from the Westlake landfill. But it's less than a quarter a mile away, correct?
I'm not clear on what the latest numbers are, so I don't think I could speak to that definitively, but I understand it's less than 1,000 feet.
Wow. But from what I read, now tell me if I'm wrong about this so-called wall, which reminds me of the disaster wall that happened in Fukushima, but that's a second issue, the wall is going to take 18 months to build.
I think it would probably even take longer than that. And an additional part that just stymies me is that this fire has already been going on for 5 years, and they're just now coming out with an announcement about building a wall. I'm very concerned about the leadership of this because obviously it has been in the federal government's best interest to ignore and, like you said, kick the can down the road for as long as possible. Well, the EPA has failed at this site for 26 years. This just can't happen anymore. We need the Army Corps of Engineers to get in there, and we understand that they have been asked by the EPA to consult regarding the law. But then the EPA is able to keep that information away from the public, and there's no sun shining, there's no transparency regarding any of that information. So I really don't think that the EPA has the health and safety of the people of St. Louis in mind as an forethought. If anything, they've been acting as sort of trying to limit liability for Republic, if you will. That's the only true action that I've seen. I have yet to see them actually mandate anything.
That's called fascism. Let's be clear. That is called fascism. That's fascism. When we do not protect the public health, these agencies are there to protect the public health, and for the 90% rule, this is why I actively engage on this. The 90% rule has got to end. We need to change the paradigm. Now, when you talk to the local elected officials, I heard you say that you meet with county commissioners, you go to meetings, you make public statements. What do these people tell you when you present them with information? What is their responses to you? How are they actively ingesting the information that you provide to them?
Each level of elected sort of has their own level of response, and it really depends on what level that you're talking to. If you're talking to a federal elected like Claire McCaskill or Boyd Blunt, they are not the least bit interested in doing any of the action-oriented steps other than suggesting that something else might happen. There has yet to be a mandate to require anything. And then as you go down, people maybe more at the local level, maybe more things like mayors and things like that, they're aware of these things, but to them it looks like a black eye, and you don't want to point out the black eye to someone, so you just don't look at it. So they largely, denial and just not talking about it has worked for a long time for a lot of people. I also have even more specific, such as county council people, and the interesting thing is the county council, at least out here in St. Charles, has been very engaged and very helpful to me, which is almost the opposite of what I've experienced with other electeds. So
say that again. So tell me that again. Say that again.
I was going to say that when I've met with my own county council, which is in St. Charles County, that they have actually embraced this issue. They have tried to be as helpful and communicative as possible, which is almost the opposite of what I've found of most electeds. And so I believe that at the council level, at the county council level, they have an understanding. This is a local problem. This is an issue that that exists right here, and people are looking to us for answers. And so I think that they do take ownership of it. It's just that the jurisdiction for the issue of Westlake and Bridgeton is a state and federal jurisdiction that they don't have any jurisdiction over at the local level. So there's really not that much they can do about it.
And that's why they're very willing to discuss it and are enthusiastic about saying, yeah, there's probably some harm. I mean, this is the thing. This is what I can't. I mean, Claire McCaskill is a, quote, Democrat, as far as I can see. She's she registered as a Democrat. She certainly isn't acting like a Democrat. And I cannot comprehend. I mean, I contributed to her campaign to help her get elected in your state. I'm not even from your state. I just wanted the country to have more. I mean, we need more of a balance. We can't just have all these Republicans who are protecting these corporations. I mean, they're shameless in their protection of the corporations. I really looked for Claire McCaskill to do much more on this than what she's done. I am dumbfounded by her own lack of interest or participation in this. Has her office given you any help or information or anything at all?
Well, it's funny that you say that because she took a lot of pride in being known as number 50. So she, was along party lines. She felt to neither extreme. She is on the Democratic ticket, but she has to appeal to a lot of Republican voters in Missouri, which I said are very conservative people. There's a lot of farmers. There's, it's a Republican state. It's a red state. So for Claire to even be elected was probably quite the negotiation on her part. I think the bigger problem now is Senator Blunt, because not only is Senator Blunt, just seemingly, will go on forever, but now he has his two sons and his wife that are all lobbyists making huge amounts of money from different corporations. And I had called it an oligarchy previously, just meaning a corporation-run political structure, but I think you really nailed it with fascism, because Senator Blunt absolutely does use the protection of the government to further his own agenda, and that is something that is a family business for him. It's his sons lobby in industries where there's a complete conflict of interest. So people do need to get wise to, just because this is the Republican candidate, do they really stand for the things that you stand for?
Well, this is, I often say that these calling themselves conservative and promoting lying is not a conservative issue. To me, that conversation of people calling themselves conservative while rubber stamping budgets that are not balanced, while denying the harm that's caused by industrial waste, that's not conservative. That is not in any way conservative. And I find it kind of shocking that people who want to have family values, who are very Christian, believe in the whole Christian ethic, are willing to keep their trap shut on an issue that is harming their future children. I'm confounded by that.
But I still can't believe that there are actually Republicans that deny climate change. But, I can't talk to those people because they're obviously extremists in their views, and they probably feel the same way about me, that I'm being extremist in my views. So it takes all kinds of people to make a world, and I just prefer to engage with people that are going to be respectful to the human beings and animals in it and to the ground that we're walking on. It's the only earth that we have, so we have to take care of it. It's our responsibility. So I'm hoping and praying that with your help, there's going to be more and more people that are recognizing the situation and becoming educated about it. It requires self-education, people. You're going to have to go out there and read a lot about it because there's a lot of information to know. But in the end, it's worth it because you'll know that you spent your life doing something that mattered, and that is really what it means.
Well, that's a perfect ending to today's show. We have 30 seconds left. Wendy, I really appreciate it. I hope you'll be willing to come back on again because you're obviously a plethora of information. I want to thank you for all your information and thank our listeners. Please do take action. And for those people that are out there, please do contact bonnerlaw.com so that we can get lawyer up in St. Louis. Put your courage feet on, you guys, and we will talk to you on Friday. Call in Friday. Please do call in. Talk to you guys later.
Thank you, Lonnie.
Sure.